And what's really important is that we have a definition of leadership that we use here, which is the that interaction where influence happens. It happens internally at first, where we influence ourselves to take the actions that we need to take in order to have the lives that we want. And as we get more effective at that, then we look at influencing others to take actions that they need to take in order to have the lives that they want. And every week we bring up one aspect of leadership, and today the we're just following up on our last week's about tending the garden. And what's really interesting is that Mike, my fellow co-facilitator here, was talking about the fact that he was thinking about a garden this past week and how when you go to a garden that isn't well tended, it's all crusty and it's hard, and if you're throwing any seeds on there, the chances of it growing isn't too great. But yet when you go to a garden that's been well tended, it's been soil, it's nice soft soil and everything, you throw something in there, it's definitely going to grow. And that brought up the idea of having a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset as a leader, as well as the concept of is it just the soil? Like is it just the thought that's the issue, or is it the heart, the intention behind it? Or could it also be something even else, like even perhaps what we're thinking about the thought? That's something else, right? So, but before we open up to the mastermind here, I just want to introduce Mark Santos as the co-facilitator and see if he wants to put anything else on this table or to elaborate on anything else that's already on the table topic for today.
Yeah, thank you, Walter. Yeah, I was thinking of this idea this morning, and I was listening to this wonderful podcast on this as well. And what really stuck out for me was, what is the quality of the soil in the garden in our minds? And the reason it really stuck out for me was, I mean, for anybody who's ever done any gardening, you know that if you're dealing with really, really hard, crusty, rocky, compressed soil, it really doesn't matter what seeds you put on there. You could have the perfect seed with the best idea, the best whatever, and it's not going to grow. And it has nothing to do with the idea itself. So it has to do with how receptive you are and your ability to nurture and provide that idea with the support that it needs to flourish and grow. And so really it made me think about the responsibility that we have as gardeners in our own mind to make sure that our soil is open and receptive and ready to accept the ideas that we want to see flourish. And so I thought it'd be a great topic to continue on from where we left off last week with the garden in our mind, because it's really easy to get focused on the seeds and, weeding the garden, but are we actually taking care of the soil?
Yeah, and I think when you talk about taking care of the soil, it's there's so many different elements of it, right? Because I know that one of my rituals and routines is to meditate and to focus on my breath and to really, I guess, till my soil, all my thoughts over, so I can actually start the day. As I always say, this is a once in a lifetime day. Anything is possible because anything that we experience, anything that we accomplish is always going to happen in the now. So the state of our mind, the state of our heart at any given moment is going to affect a lot of things that happen in that moment, right? That's why the whole idea that we're energetic beings having a human experience of cause and effect. Every decision we make or don't make has an effect, and it's affected by the way that we think, the way that we feel, right? Even though our thoughts and our feelings aren't who we are. Because yeah, if you've ever noticed it, you can have a thought that you don't know where the heck it came from, or a feeling that you're not quite sure where it came from. And a lot of times we make assumptions that it's all to do with what's happening right now. But really, when you think about it, yeah, there's we have thoughts and feelings, and quite often our decisions is based on what we think about the thought, or what we interpret the feeling as to being, because that's going to dictate our emotions, which is going to dictate our actions, which is going to affect the way we experience reality and other people experience reality, and being engaged with us. Mark?
Yeah. And it's also really ties well into that idea that you're always talking about as well, and how we show up energetically in terms of, projecting the past onto the future in the present moment. So it's that past and future thinking perspective. And I think that that soil can get really hard, or what some people might call, you get really hard-hearted, right? And you allow that layer of of you know of the past. In effect, it's bad weather, it's bad circumstances that you've been through in the past, which creates an environment where you automatically assume that what happened in your past is going to happen in the future. And so when those new seeds come along, you're not able to receive them in the now and in the present moment. And then as a result, they may just die because they never get a chance to be nourished and grow.
But you know what's interesting is those darn weeds, man. They always grow no matter what. Like they find a way to grow the weeds, right? So yeah, so I like to throw this out to Mastermind. What do you think is the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset? Because in personal development, I know in performance training, I teach about it, I coach around it, but having a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset, if we were to compare that to having that the growth mindset being like that nicely tilled soil, right? It's all you get the right color, and the fixed mindset more of a kind of a fix. It's solid. It's got a few cracks in it. But how would you describe, or what's your interpretation of a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset? Who'd like to take a stab at that? Miriam, I know you're moving. You're moving for the unmute button.
True. Um, if we talk about the soil, I believe that the growth mindset is a moisture, healthy soil, and it's a constant changing soil. So it's not staying still. The growth mindset is someone that always questioning, like you always taught us to be curious, questioning, and learning. So if we compare it to a soil, so it would be something like that, moist, always, like a moist, always like feeding it, always giving it nutrients, uh, weeding it, and it's just we attending to it continuously.
Okay. Awesome. And I knew I know that Wolfgang was also reaching for his mute button as well, and he might have something interesting to share with us. Perhaps.
Well, yes. What came to my mind when I was listening? Uh, I'm also very habit oriented and morning routine, and recently I noticed it's not so easy. Somehow it's not easy currently. And just today I sent a post into my group. I'm working with a group of people on habits since 6.5 years and for the next 6 years. And I realized we are in this quest, this work we are doing. Very often I reflect to the outside and I realize how this work we are doing is connected to circumstances in the outside. And there is one saying of Robin Sharma, it's hard at the beginning, it's messy in the middle, and it's gorgeous at the end. So every process is defined by these three phases. And we're in this second phase of this process, of this 12 years process, where it's like currently messy. And I had a look since when we are in this messy phase of this 12 years process, which we just started randomly. I realized this messy phase started 2 years ago. And when I look out in the world, what happened 2 years ago, there is a correlation to really mess. What comes from which is going on, like 2 years ago, Ukraine started. And so I had a look at I look at it really pragmatically. I know the dates, I know the times, I know how many days it is from to. And currently, in this current phase, we are in a messy phase of we repeat a certain quest, and currently we repeat it for the 28th time. And in this quest, we are also in a messy phase. What I'm saying is there is something what we can do, but there is outer circumstances which has an impact on our soil. So I can care about my soil, but there is things from the outside which have an impact on my soil. How I approach that currently with loving kindness to myself. So I'm kind to myself with having difficulties in things I am actually very good at. So there is something which is in my influence, and there is things which come from the outer influence, and I can be as good as I can, and still there will be an outer influence on my field. There is a practical thing from our garden. We have a garden and we have neighbors. And when our neighbors are spraying their field with chemicals and the wind goes in the wrong direction, this whole shit from them is in our garden. Not as we would spray it directly, but there is something what we rather would not have. So there is an influence from other gardens. So other, how you say, other soils around us have an influence on our soil. So it is important to create an awareness with people around us so they start caring about their soil, and they have an awareness, creating this awareness in their neighbors. So actually how they care about their soil has less and less impact on my soil. So it's a very complex thing, which is not only dependent on me, how my soil is. Because the soil is not only the soil is the air around, and through the air, a lot of things get transported. And this is, as I said, very practical in our garden. And and we need to talk to our neighbors how they treat, and that takes time. It takes time, and it takes rigor. My wife can be very rigorous, and they call her in the village the sheriff. So you need to be very rigorous and have a standing, otherwise you care about your soil and other people pee on it.
Awesome.
Somehow like that came to my mind.
Okay, awesome. Miriam.
I think last week I brought it up myself that, okay, we have the garden, but the environment, the outside forces, as Wolfgang are right now mentioning, it would affect it. But now that I've been thinking about it since last week, is you don't really actually set up your garden in a poisonous environment anyway. So you choose your neighbors, you choose the neighborhood, you choose people that you want to interact with. Although there are things that, outside of our control that we cannot change, then creating the awareness, what you're saying, Wolfgang, and creating, preparing for those obstacles that we may, face during that, it would be useful. And for me, yeah, let's say, imagine that, we already have a healthy environment, healthy neighbors, a healthy neighborhood, but suddenly the neighbors change. Suddenly they're going to do exactly what you said, poison it, but we are already prepared for it. We already know the day that they're doing the poisoning, we will cover all of our plants. So there are ways being anticipating these obstacles and being prepared for it, I think, is very important. And then the same thing in our mind. If we haven't gone through the self-mastery journey, we wouldn't have the tools. Now that we have the tools, then we can be consciously aware of all the threat on our garden, that we could actually prepare for it and be vigilant about it. That's what I think.
Awesome. Mark, you have something to say? I have something to say on that, but I'd like to get Mark's thoughts first.
Yeah, I think both Wolfgang and Miriam are bringing up really important aspects of the environmental effects on the soil that we have and that we are left to tend. And I think especially with social media, modern media in general, we're dealing with news, we're dealing with societal norms, and each of us are living in different cultures, different environments around the world. Societal pressures, music, television, movies, all of these things are shaping and are external environmental pressures on the soil in our mind. And we're in this perpetual state of, being bombarded, especially now in more of the modern era. But I too, like you, Miriam, see it as an opportunity in that we have all of these incredible tools now, especially for us that we've been masterminding for the last, number of years together, where we can leverage things like daily habits and routines, right? We do have the ability to set up, in effect, geodesic domes like you have in the image behind you in our minds to protect ourselves from those external environmental conditions, right? Whether that's prayer or meditation, gratitude. And we can also make a conscious choice to selectively engage with the mass media that we want to engage with. And I think developing conscious awareness of our responsibility in the gardens of our minds and taking care of the soil and which seeds we're planting in there. And whether or not we're tilling the soil on a regular basis, like you talked about, and making sure there's lots of moisture and minerals and nutrients for that soil to be ready to properly accept the thoughts and the ideas that we do want to see flourish and grow. And I think that we have that power and we have that ability and we have that responsibility, in effect, to shape that in our minds to get the results that we want. And I just see it as an incredible opportunity to become more consciously aware of how impactful that soil and those seeds are in our minds, so that we can nurture and get the harvest that we desire, rather than what we've been bombarded with throughout our lives. And I think one last point I'd just like to make is is, you know, I'm 51 this year, right? And I really wish I fully understood the impact that media has on us as kids growing up, you know, like that was, you know, way back in the 80s for me, you know, even the 70s in some cases. But the point is that a lot's happened in that trajectory. And back in the 70s and the 80s, the idea of being media savvy was not even really an idea that I was consciously aware of. Right. But now we have this incredible opportunity because we can be selective about what we choose to absorb through books, television, movies. We can make a conscious choice to engineer our gardens more effectively. And I just see it as an incredible opportunity. And so I'm appreciative of all of you sharing your ideas on this. But I want to leave it on an empowering message. Like we do have the power to garden our minds more effectively now than really ever before.
Yeah, I think it's great to leave it on an empowering thing, but I think we also have to understand that in the energetic world, there's a thing called entrainment, where you have two energy sources in the same room. Whichever more intense will either bring somebody's energy up or bring the other one down. So that's something that is real. They've even I heard neuroscientists talking about it, that they've done studies now where they notice that stress reactions are contagious. And I think that we have to be really aware that like the majority of our decisions, according to neuroscientists, aren't even conscious choices. That only 5%, they say, 95% are subconscious. I think that's why it's important to have a growth mindset as opposed to just a fixed mindset, right? And even when I said even what I've been using more and more, and some of the things, when I catch myself making assumptions that even Wolfgang was going to tell us something profound and deep, and I said perhaps, I don't know, right? For all that I know is maybe he had a bad neurotransmitter, had a bad morning, and all of a sudden showed up in catabolic energy. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen the next moment, but I suspect because of Wolfgang that he would come up with something that was happy, right? And I think that what's really important for us to understand is that a growth mindset, a fixed mindset, really does require an awareness. And I know I heard this term once, and I use it more, that I don't have to agree or believe in something in order to contemplate it. Right? I'm willing to hear, but there's advantages, disadvantages to that, right? Because in order to be able to do that, you definitely have to have a growth mindset. You definitely have to be able to discern. You have to know yourself. You have to know your values. You have to know what you believe, but yet still be able to contemplate and hear somebody else out, right? And so I think that this idea of a growth mindset and kind of a fixed mindset is really important. But I think that we also have to remember that a lot of what we do, it comes from a subconscious level, and there's a lot of programming, and that's why even the concept of unlearning some of the stuff we learned in the 80s and the 90s is really important to having more of a growth mindset, because not everything that we learned back then is really even serving us now, right? Like we have to be willing to be open to new ideas, but also be open to that some of the ideas that we thought weren't good ideas back in the day maybe are actually really helpful now, right? Miriam, and then Wolfgang.
One more thing that I wanted to mention is our state of mind. I think that is, if you're talking about the mind as a garden, and we are the gardener, the mood and the emotions of the gardener affects, everything. Just as an example, my mother is very good with the plants. So when she's here, all the plants are growing, they're green, they're beautiful, they're happy. When she leaves, they're kind of, sad, and then they dry out and they die. So the mindset of the gardener, it's a very important factor, our mindset, are we singing through, this garden, taking care of them, talking to the plants, really paying attention to what's happening in our garden in a very positive and a joyous, kind of a mood, or the gardener is sitting at the corner, sad, and doesn't even care, if there is a weed, growing in that corner or not. So the mindset of the gardener is very important. Right now, another thing that I was thinking, I'm right now living in a very area that hurricane and storm is really, it's, if you don't prepare for it, it could destroy you. It could destroy your home. So as a gardener last week, I said, like, what if there is a flood? What if it's a disaster, natural disaster? Now I am just going through this experience. I am understanding that if you have a good impact windows, and if your building is solid, if you did all the preparation that requires to go and survive the storm, nothing would affect your garden. Nothing would affect, your home. And the same thing as we just talked about it earlier, that being aware and also preparing and using the tools and implementing all the tools that we already learned, it would really guarantee the survival of our garden. So that's what I wanted to actually, this is kind of like a very close to my heart right now. I'm going through last few days, since I got back, more or less, I felt that, my mindset hasn't been to the right place. So one day I'm depressed, one day I am like, feel that it's impossible, change is impossible. And another time I am more hopeful that things would change. So now I'm realizing that our mindset is the key.
Awesome.
That's all I'm saying.
Good point. Wolfgang.
I want to share an observation. I recently had some conversations with gentlemen about the circle of men, and I realized that the consumer mindset is very integrated in our being today. And what I mean by that is, I'm okay. And the interesting thing is, I think it's a question of age, of experience, but possibly young people can have the mindset of being connected. So it doesn't necessarily mean that young people would not be able, but it's a question of influence from the environment, where actually we realize, and if I want to create an environment, I have to be the teacher, I have to share, I have to be interested. And why I came to that was, we talked before, it's possible. We could actually put something over our garden, not to receive the pesticides from the neighbors. But that's actually not the solution. It is a solution for now to protect myself, but it's not a long-term solution. But it means really to awaken the elder in the people again. What I see is, in the last 30 years, the elders were really put aside. And even in corporate world in the 90s, the elders were eliminated because they were too expensive. So there was a big thing about, and the elders are actually the teachers of the children, because the middle age doesn't have a time. They're busy, they're working, they do things, and they should, because they have the energy to. The elders are so wise, they have all the knowledge, and they know actually it always goes further. And what I feel or what I experience also is that the elders kind of gave up. We need to re-establish the village. And I think it's our generation, because I see a lot of elders, parents, they are frustrated because they basically built their environment. That we need to create consciously grandfathers and grandparents who basically we will become, or we already are. Possibly we can already be grandparents. And this includes teaching the patience to share what Mark does. He shares on Mondays over and over and over and over again. So the quality of consistency and patience is what actually is giving the knowledge about how to behave. Because honestly, Mariam, I'm wondering since I'm a little child, why people live actually in these areas where every year a hurricane comes through. I mean, especially Oklahoma. I wonder why people live there. I mean, I understand they are there possibly since generations, but if I build my house in a flooding area, I shouldn't be surprised that every 5 years my house is flooded and I have to get out the mud of the basement. And what it is actually connected to, in Austria, there is places where people sold land for building houses, and this was literally flooding area. And what it needs is people who are older than 5 years, they simply know, come on, don't do that, because every 5 years there is a flooding. So it needs a lot of ignorance and 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 not being in this respect of elders to simply not do things. So if I build my house in a flooding area, I shouldn't be surprised if my house is flooded. And why is that happening? Because the elders are not in charge, because they would know, first of all, where is a flooding area, and they would not allow somebody to let somebody build there. Today is like, I can make money, you come, you don't think, I just sell it to you. And I know that you build a house in an area where I wouldn't build a house. So there is a responsibility which we need to recreate. And I think NG and relationship are foundations for that. So I'm very grateful for this environment and for building these relationships, because many things in today's world we can only do because there is no relationship to that, because we don't care. I take advantage of somebody. I wouldn't take advantage of my brother or my sister or my son. I wouldn't do that. This is only possible because we don't have the relationships. Thanks for listening.
Mark, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, so many great things were said there. So I would like to bring it back to entrainment a little bit, because I think entrainment, what Walter was talking about, is the same thing you were talking about a moment ago, Wolfgang, which is sort of the weather of life and the environmental conditions. So we can choose to put ourselves in a flood zone or in a hurricane zone for a lot of different reasons, right? And in the modern era, that would translate into, we can choose to consume the news. We can choose to consume television. We can choose to consume, music and radio, and specifically what type as well. So it's not like all news is the same. It's not like all music is the same or all movies are the same. So we can choose to what entrainment we want to be entrained into. And then social media really sort of reinforces that as well, because of the media bubbles. It's very easy to get into a death doom cult style environment where everybody's focused on the negative, and all of a sudden all you're doing is entraining yourself with negative thoughts. It may you may be able to justify it in your own mind because it's coming from, you know, a spiritual perspective that you're in alignment with, but still you're being bombarded with a negative perspective, right? It could be right-wing politics, left-wing politics. It doesn't really matter, middle, you know, whatever that is. You can choose what entrainment you're putting yourself in. And if you don't choose, it will choose you. Right? So that's the other side. So you're in control of the weather in effect, right? In that you can choose your environment that you put yourself in, and you can make conscious choices. And I also really love what you were saying too, Miriam, about also choosing the, like, you might, you know, have a garden planted in this particular region or area, and you're dealing with, you know, tornadoes and hurricanes and whatever else. But what type of gardener you choose to be is also a conscious choice that you can make, in terms of, are you going to be a gardener that's like talking to your plants and loving on your plants and actively engaged in tending your garden? Or are you just throwing out the seeds and going and plugging into whatever, you know, entrained environment you're into and neglecting your garden? So you have a conscious choice as to whether to be that passionate, focused gardener, or are you choosing to, you know, fall subject to your environment and the entrainment that you're around. And I think that really speaks to the quality of the soil, because if you choose to put yourself in a hard-hearted environment, expect your soil to be hard and hard-hearted. And then are you able to actually nurture those seeds? And is there, like, the sunny day, I think, is having that joy-filled heart that you were talking about, Miriam, that your mom has when she's around the house, and she, by her spreading that joy, she's bringing sun and love and light onto those seeds in her mind. Right. So like, we have the ability to make a conscious choice as to whether or not it's going to be a sunny day, or is there going to be a tornado going on in our mind, and we're focused on all of the negative. And to the last point is, we can choose to be resilient. We can choose to be consistent. We can choose to be persistent. We can choose to be have a grateful heart. And we can choose to be passionate and engaged gardeners in our mind, right? Or we can choose to be neglectful, right? But either which way, these are all conscious choices that we get to make as gardeners in our mind, and how we're tending our soil, how we're tending the gardens, how we're dealing with the weeds, how we're dealing with the weather. And I would go as far as to say, we make the tornadoes in our own mind, or it can be a sunny, lovely day. So I'm complete.
Before we go to Miriam, I want to have a little say on this. I agree with some of the things you said, Mark. I disagree with some. And the reason why
It wouldn't be a good mastermind otherwise.
No, because I think that, like, one of the things that I teach people is that there's three types of businesses: our business, their business, and God's business, right? And I think that what's really important too is, like, even the idea that Wolfgang said, right, is that you're in a floodplain, you go build there, right? I think there is a place for wise counsel, right? I think the elders should step up and give some sage advice, but that's all it is. It's advice, right? We're under this illusion that we're making conscious choices. But really, when you think about it, what awareness does, it gives us responsibilities, because it gives us an ability to know that we have a choice. When I'm coaching my high performance athletes, and sometimes there's toxic environments in a room, in a team, what have you, right? So one of the things that we go through with them is that there's actually 5 approaches that you can approach a toxic environment, right? This could be the weather. You could remain a victim to it. You could just stay there and just be a victim and tell everybody how crappy your garden is and why the weather is so crappy and do all that. You can leave it. You can move. You can move yourself. You can move the garden, right? You could accept it. Just deal with full acceptance. And part of the acceptance is that it is what it is, and you will make some decisions, which will be the fourth step, which is to change it, change something about what's going on there, whether it's go talk to your neighbor, maybe cover it up, use different soil, whatever it is that you need to do, you can change something about the environment to make it more effective for you, or you could change your perspective about it, right? And I know that even as Miriam is talking, right, one of the things that her mom comes in, she's seeing the same plants you are, except she's got a different perspective of that, right? So there's a lot of things that are within our control, but on the other hand, it's like this. It's like when a thought comes up, just because we have a thought doesn't mean that maybe it's a depressing thought. We don't have control over what thought pops up or what feeling we have, but what affects our emotional state is what we think about that thought and how much we dwell on that thought and what we interpret the feeling to be and who's responsible for that feeling. So I think that we have to understand that having awareness and also realizing when you're being affected by what you're watching or the people you're hanging out with, right? What's that? I think Andrew always talks about you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? So yeah, like who's your success posse? Do you have different people? Does everybody just agree with everything you say? Like I don't. I have people that from all different walks of life. I have different masterminds. I do different presentations. There's masterminds where I just talk about Jesus. There's masterminds where I talk about energy. I have this one that talks about leadership. Like to me, it really doesn't matter because I have a growth mindset and I'm willing to contemplate what people say and I don't have to agree with it or believe in it. But I do believe that we are not making conscious choices the majority of the time. And part of our responsibility is to raise our level of awareness so we can ask and be curious enough to ask questions of ourselves. Is what I'm saying really true? Like I always tell people, like, be a skeptic, like be skeptical with me. I don't know if I don't have the truth, right? That's why even when I do the greatest words, I read the words that he spoke and then I let everybody have their point of view. And then we go back and let people work that out for themselves. Your Gallum.
I wanted to say something after Walter.
Oh, sorry, Miriam. I think you had your hand up first. So Miriam, and then your Gallum. Sorry about that. We're right in my camera spot. Right?
Another point. No, I think the hands came down for some reason. Another point that I think I'm thinking that is very important is how strong is our roots, the plant's roots in that garden. So our roots speaks of volume. Actually, if you're talking about ourselves as a gardener and our mind as a garden, so that means how skilled we are to go to the level of transcending to the level 7 that we can be, as Mark was just mentioning it, we can actually be in a storm and nothing would affect us. Or if we need to be in a situation that, like there would be a dry soil, we will still survive. Actually, I was studying a little bit about the trees. There is truth that in any garden, in any environment, when there are trees, there is one mother tree. The mother tree would support the weaker trees. And you could see it in the parks, you could see it other places. So kind of like very interesting. It was so, and that's who we are. What Wolfgang was talking about, the elder. We are the elders of the future. We are the grandma and grandpas, and we are responsible to have our roots so strong that we be able to stand. Even there is a poison from the neighbor, it would just flow by and it would not affect us. So our roots are very important. And how we can do our roots is that exactly what we're doing right now. We need to be so skilled in these skills of self-mastery, learn through these, emotional transcending up and down when it's needed, then we can support other people. As the leaders, we're talking about the leadership. So we need to be that strong tree to support other people. So our roots are the key, building our roots.
Cool. Gallum.
The first idea that came to my mind when we were being asked this question, the growth and fixed mindset, guys, do not kill me on this one, okay? So for me, the image that came to my mind, the fixed mindset is like the guy's hair. They have the same hairstyle all the time. And then the ladies have different styles, and actually we cannot even remain the same hairstyle. So that's how the image that came to me when we was asking the question, fixed and growth mindset. So that's what I wanted to share.
Yeah, I think that the one thing, because we're getting closer and closer here, is just to remember that we with awareness work, where it's not about getting to the highest level of energy that we can, right? It's about getting to high enough that we can transcend who we think we are. Because who we think we are is what creates the fixed mindset, right? Because I agree that if we're older, we should share our knowledge with people, but there's a difference between being self-righteous and being wise, right? And the reason why I created the greatest words ever spoken was because there's been a lot of people who've been morally wounded by self-righteous people, right? And self-righteous, and when you think about it, it can actually be it can really show up in a level 2 energy. I'm right, you're wrong. And I think that what's really important is to really understand that there are times when we all have a growth mindset, and a fixed mindset you're not just one or the other, right? We have ebbs and flows, just like nobody's ever at level 7 energy or level 6 all the time or level 5. That's why there's ebbs and flows. That's why the only constant in life is change. There are times where I will say unkind things to people, and then I have to apologize for it. There's times where I'm just amazing for people, and they think I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread. I can't take either one of them from them because I'm human. Sometimes I could say some really wise things. Sometimes I cannot. Sometimes I have a fixed mindset. Sometimes I have a growth mindset. Understanding that we are human, and that, because what happens is that I noticed that with some of the high performers, the first thing they do when things don't go their way is they come to me and, well, what do I have to do? I go, I don't know, you do lots already. But who are you being? Right? If you really look at it, the world doesn't need more people to do more stuff. And it needs more people to learn how to be, because in that space of being, you find even in the quantum field, when they talk about that, at any given moment, every version of us exists, right? Being able to choose that highest and best version of ourselves in any given moment is what's really important, and we need a high level of awareness with that. If we haven't let some of the past pain go, that's going to come up in the way we feel. If we're not aware that thoughts are not who we are, we're going to get fixated on a thought and thinking that that's the correct way of viewing things. I don't know. I think that we have to be open, but yet be able to discern and understand who we are and who we're not, and what was programming and what is my ability to make a different choice. Right? And have that courage to make different choices. That's why I stress a success posse, because the success posse gives you different perspectives. Success posse is not supposed to be everybody having the same thought. And that's why I love the greatest words, because I invite everybody from any walk of life or ideology to come and discuss it with us, right? But Mark. You had your hand up.
Yeah, all phenomenal points, Walter. And I really wanted to just agree with you so much on like that you set up that environment, that toxic environment scenario, and developing awareness and recognizing that there's multiple different ways that you can respond to that toxic environment. And I think that over time that it definitely has an impact on the quality of your soil, because it is, you know, if you're just a victim, you're just going to walk away and leave your garden unattended. Whereas if you're engaged and you accept and you're, you know, participating in the gardening process, that you're going to tend to that environment and through conscious awareness. And I couldn't agree more. And then the last point I just wanted to agree with you on too is that recognition that, like, who is the gardener? If we're talking about the garden in your mind, who is the gardener? And, you know, you could, you know, I know Eckhart Tolle talks about watching the thinker, but recognizing that, for me at least, there's a spirit in there, right? And that the spirit is really your spirit, your soul, your connection to that higher self, however you want to frame it. But recognize there's a spiritual component in there that can tend the garden, right? That you're not your thoughts, and that you can watch your thinking, and that it's possible to change the garden and the soil. And I think that comes from that connection to something greater than just your mind and your body. So I just wanted to agree with a lot of those phenomenal points you left on. And I think that really speaks to becoming a very skilled gardener as well. And I really appreciate your point, because I remember like the 20-year-old version of me would have really had a hard time having this, understanding this conversation, right? But just recognizing that you have the capacity, you have a garden in your mind, B, what seeds you plant in there grow, D, you can tend it, you can change it, and you don't have to just accept the garden that you were given. You have the ability to become whatever it is you want to become. And part of that is a body perspective, part of it's mind, but there's, to neglect the spirit would be extremely negligent, because I think that is the gardener itself. So thank you. That's just perhaps, at least.
Perhaps, and I think that I think everybody had some really good points today, and I love I love the vision of Miriam's mom talking to the plants, and just how they're all thriving, and then when she goes away, they start to wither and die, right? So I think that we all the biggest thing is that we are all gardeners, we're all planters as well. We all plant seeds with other people around us. And I think that when we can show up in any given moment as the highest and best version of ourselves, it really does require us to contemplate things that we may not agree with or even believe in. But it's just that act of contemplating, and really being able to um, be open, but also to be sure of what you believe in as well, right? Like it's so that because I think that the thing that we're needing more and more is connection, right? And I think that masterminds like this, where people feel safe to talk about different points of views, and even like I did today, I actually came out and said, I don't agree with you, right? And you didn't get offended by it, you got excited by it. Okay, great, let's right, because yeah, and if you're leading a mastermind and you got people around you and not everybody agrees, that's awesome.
That's how you learn.
Yeah.
Like, you can't learn otherwise. So if everybody agreed with one another, it'd be kind of a pointless endeavor.
That's why mastery, in order to hit mastery is not an outcome. It's a process. And when you get to the self-mastery, you start realizing that what you know is really just a speck of sand in a beach, a whole long beach of wisdom, right? And the only difference that mastery can do for you is it gives you a different relationship with uncertainty. Because the biggest thing that we all struggle with is fear, right? And when you start to get if you start to get some kind of mastery in whatever endeavor you're doing, you have a different relationship with uncertainty, because you realize that no matter what happens, you're going to grow and you're going to learn. And that's a ticket. And if you're having a hard time just being bummed out about the state of your garden, as Mark always says, gratitude is the roadside assistance when we break down on the highway of life. Become more grateful. Find things to be grateful about, right? Go and tell somebody that you love how much you care about them and how grateful you are for their being around in your life. Tomorrow I get here in Canada, we have Thanksgiving coming up this weekend. I'm going to go spend it with my family, my nieces, my nephews, my brothers, and I'm going to focus on just being grateful. Right? A lot of families, when they get together, they use it as an opportunity to nick and pick at each other. Right? My goal is not going to be to do that. My goal is just to be grateful and just appreciate everybody in the room. Right? So yeah. So as we're coming to an end here, and I want to be really, really conscious of everybody's time, is that like be aware of what you think about. Right? You don't always have control over what thought pops up or what feeling you have. But you have the power of whether or not you want to dwell on that thought or that feeling, right? Make sure that you are not allowing your garden to just grow any which way it wants, right? In your garden, if you had a weed coming up, I know all the ladies here would go pull it out, right? If you got a thought that isn't serving you, right? Reframe it, stop it, shift it, do whatever you have to, right? But don't allow the weeds to rob you of your joy of being alive, because being alive is a gift. This day today we have is a once in a lifetime day. We will never live this day again. We will never have the same experiences. Imagine if you actually walked around with that belief at the heart level. How would you be talking to different people? Who would you be calling? What would you be doing? What would you be creating, right? Because once this day is gone, it's a goner, right? So live in today and be grateful for today, and just go see what magic you can actually create today by just being the amazing version of who you can be. Mark, you want the last word?
No, I think that was fantastic, Walter, and happy Thanksgiving to everybody from here in Canada. And I know everybody else gets their Thanksgiving, at least down south, a little bit later, but I'm really grateful for all of you. And I'm grateful for this day. I'm grateful for just an opportunity to learn and grow. Like, even if you don't have anybody in your life, even if you're all by yourself, be grateful for this day, because you can change that. And it just does require reflecting on the soil that you have in your heart and in your mind, and how you're tending your garden. So thank you, Walt.
Take care,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody.
Great day.